Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share with you one of the most important process for implementing evidence-based solution in the real world. My name is Malaz Bustani, and I am a geriatrician and Richard M. Fairback Professor of Aging Research at Indiana University School of Medicine and Director of Care Innovation at Askenazi Health. And I also founded the new Center for Health Innovation and Implementation Science. So before I start, I need to disclose a couple of potential conflict of interest that might be important for you to know of because it might influence my information exchange with you. I have started 4 companies where I have equity ownership of them, and they are listed here. And I also been a member of the advisory board and a consultant for multiple pharmaceutical company that have potential products in the market. And I also receive royalty from 2 books, the Agile Implementation book and the Agile Network book. And finally, I receive funding from the federal government, and I teach a graduate certificate in innovation implementation science at Indiana University. So before we start talking about the Agile implementation, I need to give you a little bit of background on this Agile science, and I'll share with you the way we see the world through this Agile science lens. And then I'll zoom in into the Agile implementation process from there. So Agile science, it's a rapidly evolving and adaptive process for not just knowledge discovery and acquisition, but also knowledge acquisition within the dynamic, constantly changing and evolving real world. So it's very real world centric and very external validity centric. And in the real world, there's always directionality, context usually matter, and in context is dominant force in the process. And there's a lot of loop and a lot of constant dynamic changes. And the whole purpose of Agile science is to integrate insight from behavioral economics, complexity science, and network science to understand, predict, and steer not only the behavior of one human individual, but the behavior of a bunch of humans who are clustered to form social organization like healthcare delivery system. And the outcome of this Agile science is providing insight to design scalable, effective, and very human-centered strategies, processes, and tools, implement them into routine care, and subsequently diffuse them across various social network like the 6,000 plus healthcare delivery system that exists in the United States and abroad. That definition of Agile science a little bit abstract, so I'm going to try to share with you the lens that you can see the real world through that might help you understand, predict, and steer the behavior of the real world. And the real world here is very human-centric, and we call it complex adaptive human network. So any healthcare delivery system is complex adaptive human network. Any social human organization is complex adaptive human network. And if you see the world through that lens, it might help you become more effective change agent and obviously more effective implementer of evidence-based solution. So in a complex adaptive human network, it's always start with very specific boundary. We call it semi-permeable boundary. And this boundary is unique because it allows certain signal, certain information, certain agent or human to get in and not allow other people to go out. So as a complex adaptive healthcare delivery system, usually the semi-permeable boundary is it's in a nutshell, the employment contract and your identification card. If you get employed by the healthcare delivery system, you went through the credentialing processes, then you get a card, an ID that allow you to get into the hospital, to get into the network. All right. And within this complex adaptive semi-permeable boundary, there's specific people. Let me stop here, Ashley, because there's noise in the background. Can you stop recording and restart all over?
They can edit that out.
They can edit it? All right, let me just take the noise out. 1 sec.
Sure, no problem.
And I want to start all over from the last slide. So let me
Yeah, you can do that. And anytime you want to just say, stop, I'm going to restate this, you can do that as well.
I got you. So I'm going to restart this slide. So the complex adaptive human network is a very nice lens that allow change agent to see the real world through, and that might give them a lot of different perspective and different tools and process strategy to implement evidence-based solution in the healthcare delivery system or any kind of planned change in any complex adaptive human network. And the complex adaptive human network start with one very crucial element, and we call that semi-permeable boundary. You see it over here. This is a very unique boundary. This boundary function is to create a high concentration of certain human to interact within this boundary. And usually this boundary operates by allowing certain humans and certain information and certain energy to get inside the boundary and leave certain human information energy out. So I'll give you an example. Imagine you are applying for a healthcare system to be a physician in a healthcare system. You go through the application, accreditation, and at the end of the day, you get employed by the healthcare delivery system and you get issued a card, an identification card. And with that identification card, you can get into the healthcare delivery system. You will have access to the electronic health record. You'll have access to a lot of services and a lot of support within that healthcare delivery system. And that's how the healthcare delivery system create this boundary to concentrate a large number of a human into within this boundary. And within this boundary, there's this special node. And this is a node that is very unique node. It's a human node. And this human, usually all of us, not usually, this is scientifically valid. We usually have two different systems of processing information. We have a very dominant system. We call it system one. It's very, very fast. It's very, very strong. And it's operate in the background without your consciousness for almost 95% of the time. But that's not enough. Every human also has another different system that is slow, that is analytic, that is conscious, that consume a lot of attention. We call it system two. And between these system one and system two, human process information. And this unique human node is not an isolated human node. It's a social being that survive by interacting with other node, other human. And the way they interact, this node interact with another human is very special type of interaction. In a simple way, this interaction is simple exchange of information and energy. between the node and sometimes even with the surrounding environment. And this exchange is unique, that is conditional. It's a what we call it if then. So if Malaz sent me an email, then I might respond to him. If Malaz saw my patient, then I might send him another patient. And that is, we call it social interaction. And again, they are conditional interaction. And based on these social interaction, these special conditional interaction, these special conditional exchange of information and energy, human emerge from them a special network. The way we organize in a very different way. So you can see we cluster around these different community. Each bunch of these node here and here and here and here, they have, we call them community. They cluster, they interact with each other more. And then there's this unique node that connects certain community. We call them bridges. And then there's this hub that is a human node that has the highest number of links. And these variation, the distribution of the number of link and the strength of these links are not normally distributed. And they are the really responsible for the emergent property of the network in its entirety. And this emergent property, we call it hierarchical aggregate agent. This is the performance of the hospital, the performance of an ambulatory center. They have very different property, and they emerge from the social interaction among all these individual member inside this semi-permeable boundary. And when this emergent hierarchical agent born, it doesn't get disconnected from the other interaction and create this loop that the hierarchical agent influence the interaction within the network, and the interaction of the network influence the property of the aggregate agent. So that's the best way to think about complex adaptive human network as a healthcare delivery system. And it's very important to know it, because these kind of perspective and lens make you understand why certain agents work effectively in implementing change and why others do not. So another way to look at the agile science is this concept of zooming in and zooming out. You zoom in to micro level, and this is where you try to understand human decision making. Then you zoom out to a macro level, you try to understand the property of the social network or the complex adaptive human network. So based on that agile science and this network in particular, agile change conductor, who are in charge of implementing evidence-based solution or innovation or diffusing innovation or evidence-based solution, they have to operate like a conductor, like a symphony conductor. The agile conductor for us, they need to think like an engineer, they need to test like scientists, they need to observe like psychologists, and they need to draw like artists. And the best agile conductor have a very nice combination of these four attributes. And within it, the agile conductor build skills and mastery that are can be conveyed in this pyramid. The foundation of the agile change conductor is this, we call it agile science and agile mindset. And based on that, they use a set of processes and agile cycle. We call that Agile Innovation Process, Agile Implementation Process, Agile Analytic Process, and Agile Diffusion Process. And usually these Agile change conductor are innovator, are great choice architect or nudger, are great storyteller, and they're very good in signal detector. And then they are also having very engaging brand. And on top of it, they become agile conductor and agile strategist. For the rest of this time, I'll focus on one of these agile processes, is agile implementation, which is a process that is built on agile cycle. So The next slide, I'll focus on the agile cycle, which is the building block for the agile processes. And then finally, I'll end with explaining the agile implementation process, which is one processes of the agile process that are built on agile science and agile mindset that agile change conductor use all the time. So this is the agile cycle. The agile cycle is very similar to PDSA cycle, a lot of other typical cycle, but has two different perspective or different feature that make it very compatible with introducing change successfully in a complex adaptive human network. The first differentiator of the agile cycle from any other cycle like PDSA cycle, it's usually built on demand. This red surface. And the agile cycle cannot even run one cycle if there's no demand. So the best way I think about demand is think about it as a surface and think about the agile cycle as the spinner, the person who is trying to spin on the surface. So if there's no demand, then it's almost like you have a very, very tough terrain. And on tough terrain, you can't even spin one time. Sometimes you might even spin half the time and fall and break your neck. So demand is very, very crucial for the success of agile cycle. Low demand decrease the probability of successful agile cycle execution and then solving problem very, very much. And when you have a very high demand, you can run multiple agile cycle, and your chance of solving the problem become exponentially high. A great example is what happened during the COVID pandemic. Prior to COVID, there was no demand for going telehealth. And I remember in our healthcare delivery system, we had less than 1% of our encounter were delivered through a telehealth. And within 1 week from COVID start, and we're going on lockout, we were able to go from less than 1% encounter delivered through telehealth to more than 90% delivered through telehealth. The only one were not delivered in telehealth were the emergency room encounter and certain hospital encounter. So demand is one of the most important feature or attribute of the unique agile cycle. Then the other feature that is important is the way you distribute your energy on the two major components of agile cycle. One component, we call it thinking, and that has plan, reflect, and adjust. Is it thinking? And another component is doing, or we call it sprint. And a very masterful agile change conductor will spend 90% of their energy on doing or sprinting and only 10% on planning, reflecting, and adjusting. So these two features of agile cycle, the foundation of demand or the sensitivity to demand for success, and spending 90% doing and only 10% planning, reflecting, adjusting, that's the only different for agile cycle from other cycles, specifically the PDSA. And that's small. These two differences are a huge impact on the success of agile cycle, complex adaptive human network. So based on the agile cycle unit, we have created these three agile processes: agile innovation process, agile implementation process, agile diffusion process, and agile analytic. And I'm going to focus now on just one of these processes. Is the crucial one is the agile implementation process. So agile implementation process has 8 steps. The first 4 steps are under the planning and the thinking part, and the other 4 steps are more on the execution part or the doing part. The first step of agile implementation process is looking at the demand for solving the problem that you are assigned to solve. And if there is no demand, then you are in a crucial branch point to decide should you attempt to create demand or not. And if you decided this is an important problem that is going to be the hill that you're going to die on, then there's a process we call Agile Diffusion that allow you to create demand. But let's imagine you're lucky and there's significant demand to solve certain problem like telehealth implementation or any other evidence. Then you have the next step with trying, also a branching point. And this is very crucial step, which for you to see, is there already an existing evidence-based solution to solve the problem that there's a lot of demand to spend to solve it or not? If the answer is there is no evidence-based solution, then here again, you decide to say, do I have enough demand to go and create a new solution? And for that piece, you have the Agile innovation process. But let's imagine you're lucky and there's already an evidence-based solution. You take that evidence-based solution and you're going to have to convert it to minimally viable product that technically supposed to be the crucial element, the essential element of the evidence-based solution. All right. We call them active ingredients. So if you look at any drug, for example, there's an active ingredient and there is support ingredient. And the minimally viable product focus on the active ingredient, the crucial ingredient, the one without them, nothing will happen. Right. And then the third step of the Agile implementation process, and you see that in other Agile processes, is because you're a human, there's very good chance that you might fall in love with your evidence-based solution. And you don't want to do that because sometimes evidence-based solution might not work for this unique local context. So before you fall in love with your solution, you develop a termination plan to kill your solution. And this 3 simple step of the termination plan is who's going to make the call, when are they going to make the call, and what criteria they're going to use. And then if you have extra time, you can use the success criteria. And success criteria and termination criteria are not the same. They're not just simply the inverse. Then after you do that, so you can protect yourself from not falling in love with your solution, then you take the minimally viable product and you localize it to the context where you are trying to solve the problem. And that is very, very crucial. And it's very important in implementation science in general. Context sensitivity in local context sensitivity in particular is very, very unique. So you have to contextualize your minimally viable product, even if you start with an evidence-based solution. And that's you're done with the 4th step of the planning or the thinking. Now you're moving and doing. In the doing, it's all about designing small experiments, small sprints, starting point, end point, the data collection you're going to do, where you're going to be testing the first version of your locally sensitive, minimally viable product and run it and monitor the sprint and look for any unintended consequences. And then after your sprint is over, you reflect on the result, on the data you collect of the sprint to decide, is this minimally viable product work or did not work? And if it did not work, is there enough demand to go back and revise it? Or should you abandon the entire solution and start all over? And after running multiple sprints where you did not have any termination plan criteria met and your evaluation plan succeeded and it worked, then you decide to, all right, how am I going to store this information for a future? And that's where you develop minimally standard operating procedure, not maximum standard. You want to develop minimally standard, and because that will allow you agility and context sensitivity in the future or another healthcare delivery system. And if you decide to spread this minimally standard operating procedure, then you can use Agile diffusion process. So let me go over these 8 steps again. So again, they have 4 planning step and 4 executing step. The first planning step is identify and confirm demand. The second one is identify evidence-based solution and develop minimally viable solution or minimally viable product. Then develop evaluation and termination plan. So you won't fall in love with your solution. At minimum, who's going to make the call of killing the solution, when they're going to make the call, and what criteria they're going to use. Then you localize the minimally viable solution and minimally viable prototype for your context, because context is everything in the real world. And then you move to the executing part or the doing, and that's all about performing sprints. implementation sprint in the minimum starting point, end point, the data collection that you're going to capture with that, and what kind of a human and element they need to run the sprint. And while you're doing that, you monitor the effectiveness of the minimally viable product that you're testing in the sprint, and you're looking for any unintended consequences. And after multiple sprints, if you didn't have to kill the minimally viable product and actually succeeded, then you end with developing minimally standardized operating procedure for spreading and storage. So that's in a nutshell is Agile implementation process. I went through it very quickly. It was built on Agile science and the complex adaptive human network, and it used one of the building block of Agile processes, and that is the Agile cycle. And the Agile cycle is very similar to a lot of other improvement cycle with two attribute and two differences. One, it's sit on demand. If there's no demand, you can't even run one cycle. If there's high demand, you can spin cycle very, very quickly. And the second one, the distribution of the energy in the Agile cycle, it's 90% doing and 10% thinking. And thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you see value from the information I share with you. Bye-bye. All right, Ashley. So that's that one. You can share with it. You can edit it. And is it possible after you edit and everything to send it to me so I can share it with my student?
Absolutely.
All right.
The only other question I had is, are you still planning on being at the meeting on January 25th?
Yeah.
Okay,
Of course.
perfect.
But is that one, it will be live, correct?
It will be live,
Yeah,
yes.
of course. Yeah,
Yes.
I will be
So
there too.
I will download this and send it to our editing partner. And then once it's uploaded on the website, we can send the link to you, or we can send the file to you to upload on your,
Beautiful.
yes,
Beautiful.
whatever you prefer.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. All right. I hope you have a happy holiday.
Same thing for you, ma'am. Take care
All
and
right.
Happy New Year.
You too. Bye-bye.